Leah. So, again, I'm Natasha, and I'm the Program Administrator for the Petroleum Restoration Program. This program's near and dear to my heart. I'll tell you, I've been working in it since 1994 on both sides, and I'm happy with the progress we've made, where we're headed, and what we've got going on right now. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to start with this little notice that many of you have probably seen on our website. Please remember that we're currently in a solicitation process. I cannot talk about anything to do with that. I can't answer any questions about logistics, and if we touch on that, if someone asks a question associated with that later, I'll probably just go ahead and let you know that I cannot answer that at this time. But any questions associated like that, you can reach out to the procurement officer that's listed on the solicitation. So we talked a little bit about our program. In the past, if you've been here before, you've probably seen a slide very similar to this. We have 4 Tallahassee teams. The first one is Matt Ingham's the team leader for that. He does the advanced cleanup, performance-based cleanup, and some difficult site reviews. So that's his contact information if you have questions on those. And we're going to touch on advanced cleanup and performance-based cleanup later in the presentation. Then on team 2, Kim Busen is Matt's a PE and Ken is a PG. Kim Busen does, he also does, in addition to the forensics contract, the PCPP program, the site access, he also does the large sites such as the ports and stuff. He kind of, his team does technical support for those and reaches out on those and manages quite a few of those. He has also recently taken on the ice cap inspections, so the institutional controls and the engineering controls, we're inspecting those, and we're not just doing that for program-funded sites. The Petroleum's doing it for all sites, all closures for Petroleum across the state, whether they were district lead or Tallahassee lead. So we're just getting those up and running, and I'll talk about those a little bit more as we move forward. And Kim Busen would be the contact for that, and that's his email address. Also, any of these are available on our website. On the left, we have quick links, and one of those are PRP contacts. So if you want their phone number or their email address later, you can find them on there. So Team 3 manages our non-ATC contracts. That's actually its formal name. And it does local program and private teams. It also does a couple other contracts like DOH, Administrative Services. And that is managed by Susan Fields. And as I mentioned, we have 2 private teams, and you guys probably, many of you have worked with them. We also have 12 local programs. Those cover 41 counties and 20 non-program counties. So, and 4 of those counties actually do enforcement under contract with the department, not just cleanup of program and non-program oversight. So all of those come through Team 3 up there with Susan Fields. And then we have Team 4, which is the agency term contracts and program metrics. This one looks a little different this time. This is Miss Jamie Lopez, is currently our team leader. She just started in this role, but she has been on that team for quite a while, and she's been with the department for over 10 years. So Blake Miller actually was on the slide last year. He is now the team leader over at Team 6, which is our one of our 2 private teams, Team 5 and Team 6. So one of the things that we've implemented previously are program metrics. I do want to let you know our website has, I put everything out there. We have so many sites, there's a lot of information out there. Familiarize yourself with it, but we do have something in a quick link on the left called monthly dashboard that is posted, and most of these metrics are out there and available monthly. We get them up before pretty regularly out there. You'll see them if you want to take a look at them. So closures by fiscal year. This is interesting. What I find interesting about this is that, we have peaks, and the reason we have peaks were assessment initiatives. We did SES, and then we stopped. and we went back down. Then we brought back SES, and we brought in LSSI, and then we brought back SES, kind of like LSA, which is our low scored assessment. And when we had low scored assessment and LSSI in their heyday, where we were pushing out of money for LSSI, these are the type of closures we've gotten. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but most of our sites have been assessed. So as all of us know, technically, if you assess a site where the discharge happened 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it's attenuated and you can get closure, that's usually a little quicker and less expensive to reach closure. So as the program has matured past that point, we're going to see probably fewer closures that take longer and cost more. So our average cost for closure is going to increase, and our closure time. So we're going to have to work on plans to offset that as we see this coming down as our assessments. And you can track through our monthly dashboards how many assessments we do a year. That's on there. And as you see our assessments changing, we are always doing reassessments. Don't get me wrong. If you assess something because it was low scored and you picked it back up when it came in funding range, you have to go out and reassess it. But we're going to see those changes, and we have seen them. So this is where we're at with assessments. And if you look at that, right now we're doing initial assessments on 1% of these sites. 2% need initial assessments, and those are things where we're struggling to get site access or those types of things if we have not done some type of initial assessment on it. And then 97% of our sites have been initially assessed. This doesn't mean that we won't be doing assessment on them as they come back into funding range. It just means that we've kind of looked at them and they didn't close after that initial assessment. So site access. You guys may recall when the program changed, industry was trying to acquire site access, and it was quite a challenge. So the department took on that role. It's still a challenge. It continues to be a challenge. Some of these discharges are older, and people are not as familiar with the program and what happened that are currently owning the properties. But what I found interesting is we pursue access on all sites, regardless of score. We're constantly pursuing access. But what's interesting is 262 of the discharges in funding range need access. Only 170 below funding range, scored below 10, need site access. Now, that's not saying when they are in funding range, we won't have to confirm that's still the site owner. But that's where we're at. And I just kind of wanted to share that we do try to get site access on all eligible sites, and we try to do assessment on them as well. So, the cleanup status of eligible discharges. We've cleaned up 63% of ours. We have 31% being cleaned up, actively managed with a site manager under PRP, under one of those teams that we pulled up earlier. That is 5,000 active sites, right around there. Nope, 6,000 active sites, sorry about that. And then we have about 1,100 awaiting cleanup. 6% of our sites are awaiting cleanup. So if you look at that, 94% of our sites have either been closed or are currently being worked on, and that is a great place to be. That's a big move on the board for the program and for the state. So taking a look at this, as I said, we've got about 6,000 sites. The other thing that PRP does is we do quite a bit of non-program oversight as well. And the program has grown, as many of you guys have noticed. We've taken on, we started taking on more and more during the pandemic, more and more non-program sites. We're currently managing this many almost 1,700 non-program sites and 6,000. So we're currently managing over 7,500 discharges across the state, actively under the Petroleum Restoration Program. So I kind of want you to see that's a 68% increase in RP, site management, that we're working with the RPs on the non-program to make sure those are up and running. That's a big push for the department, is to make sure all non-eligible sites are actively moving forward under 62780. We're working closely with the districts on those. We communicate regularly on what's going on with these non-program discharges. And for the program, over the last couple of years, as you see, we've really stepped up the number of sites we're managing. Average days to issue a purchase order. So I will tell you our goal is to bring this down. Last year, the 36, and I think what we saw here is so many sites getting activated at the same time, and we're going to move this back, but we're also seeing the same struggles you see, and it's been communicated. Getting quotes is a challenge. Getting quotes, getting drillers. We're busy. With that influx of sites comes an influx of work for everyone. And so the infrastructure catching up and able to keep up with us has been part of this, but also we experience the staff turnover just like everyone else, and we're constantly in training and hiring to get this number down. And when I say we, I'm talking about all of those teams. So like I said, we've got, 6 teams 1 through 6, and 12 local programs, so 18 teams working on that. And none of them, including industry, have not told me that turnover is an issue and hiring's an issue, and quotes are an issue. So we do have in your contract the ability to do performance-based. That doesn't require backup quotes, so keep that in mind if you're struggling to get the quotes to move forward. I do want to share with you that all of our contracts and all of our performance expectations for state have turnaround time requirements in them. So I do want you guys to know that this is something that we take seriously, not just in it's turnaround times for deliverables, as well as turnaround times for issuing purchase orders. So I will say that with growing, we're issuing more and more purchase orders than we ever have before. And you did see the 36 days. I think that this plays into it as well, is more active sites, more purchase orders to be issued. But we are continuing to grow. I don't see that changing. I see the program continuing to grow and do more. So this doesn't include the work orders under LSSI. But this is just talking about purchase orders. Funding. So we all recall the challenges we ran into here with funding, and it was a hardship for everyone, no more so than industry, I think. We've started growing back. This year we were able to also, in addition to what we've been given from the legislature, we were also able to utilize $50 million from ARPA. So if you look at this is going to include $50 million from ARPA. We usually get $8 to $9 million. I think this year it was about $9 million carryover from ethanol biodiesel. In our line item, there is $10 million that is identified. So some people may think this was $195 million. This is $185 million, and $10 million is earmarked for the ethanol biodiesel program that's managed by PCAP. If it's not utilized that fiscal year, it is rolled over into our budget, so we see it the next year here. So as you can see, and then we had just a little bit of carryover, but not much. So we have unprecedented ability to fund work, which is why we have so many active sites and why we're moving forward with more and more. So, we've seen the closures decline based on the assessment, but with the funding increase, we should be able to implement the remedial strategies needed for some of these difficult sites, some of these more complex sites, and that's what I'm excited to be able to get to. We had the funding available, and we have those sites that have just been financially challenging. So those are things we'll be able to do now. So talking a little bit more about our transition from assessment to remediation. As you saw, we've assessed 97% of our sites with initial assessment. I want to be very clear, those are initial assessments, and they may have happened 10 years ago when LSSI started, but So they may have to be reassessed, and they were probably not fully assessed, especially under LSSI. If you realize you're not going to close it, you stop. So there's still more assessment work to be done, but it will lead us into remediation most likely. Or alternative closure options are also can be considered, but if they closed after preliminary assessment, they did close. Long-term monitoring is an option. You guys may have recalled we released some updated guidance on long-term monitoring, and we discussed that here recently, a year or so ago, about, revisiting sites that have been in long-term monitoring. If you've been doing monitoring for 3 or 4 years and you're not seeing a reduction, it's not going to get us to our closure endpoint. We do need to do something active at that point, or look at the closure goals and see if we're there. So keep that in mind. If you have sites that are in monitoring and it is not going to close the site, then we do need to do an alternative option for those. So reach out to your site managers, reach out to the team leaders, the Ps, the PGs associated with those sites, and look at what the next step is. Let's don't just monitor to monitor and not close, because we'd like to move forward with other sites. And then, so we did touch on that. We did touch on the fact that it is more expensive to close with remediation. And remediation right now can be a challenge with utilities and quotes and electricians and drillers. I do get that, but I do think it's where we're going to need to go with these sites. And the quicker we can get, them assessed and into remediation, the quicker we're reducing the contamination in Florida. So that is our ultimate goal, to protect human health and the environment, as Leah said. So we do want to make sure it's safe. Monitoring does that, but also we want to go ahead and kind of get it out the books and move on to the others in the backlog. We do know that it may be more difficult to issue a remediation scope than a continuing NAM scope. I get that, but let's please move forward with those if we can, and it's the right thing to do. So you probably remember me talking about the ESSA portal for submittal of deliverables, and many of you are using that, and I appreciate it. This is where you can upload your deliverable yourself, and it's automatically put into Oculus, and it's automatically put into Stickum, which is our database, which does track our turnaround times. It tracks your turnaround times as well. It makes sure that the date you received it is what is put into our database, which is Stickum, for being received. So if you use that, that's a great tool. It's optional. It's out on the website. One of the things we've been asked is to be able to email that to more than one person, and you can do that by putting a comma between the email addresses. There is a 50-character limit. We're working right now to increase that limit in case some people want to put in several emails, so we're going to make that adjustment for you. So I'm sure this doesn't come to news to anybody, but we're at 10. We're at all sites scored 10. If you see a site that's not assigned, scored 10 or under, there's reasons. Sometimes they've hit their cap and we're working with the owner to get those moving, or their site access or legal issues moving forward with it. So we are down to a score 10, which is great for the program. I know many of us have been around since we were at score 75, and I'm not talking about the pandemic, I'm talking about back in the 90s, so that's good. So, ice cap inspections. This is something we're excited to have started, and it's turning up some issues. So you guys may be contacted by owners if they have an institutional control or an engineering control that they're not following, or that they need to do some corrective action to get in compliance with the order. They get a notice and time to address that. So as you see, we've done 45 inspections, and out of the 45 inspections, 19 had to have corrective actions. So keep that in mind. A lot of times it's cracked asphalt, I'll tell you. That's what we're running into quite a bit. There have been some other issues, but that is predominantly the issue where they're not maintaining the cap. So we've received, out of those 19 requested, we've received 10 corrective action plans. 7 of the sites have executed corrective action plans that have been approved. So out of the 10, we've approved 7 of them. So that's something that we're excited to have going for petroleum sites right now across the state. And you may get contacted from one of your clients asking you to look at their report or their findings. So advanced cleanup, it's up to $30 million. We are currently in an application period right now on our website. If you go out there, you can submit sites for the advanced cleanup program. And a minimum of 25% cost share or cost savings is asked for, required by statute to participate in the advanced cleanup program. And the newest thing, which is a couple years old now, is we do the LCAR after you submit the application. Prior to that, the LCAR had to be included in the application. So if you're just now aware that there's an application period, there's lead time for you guys to do the LCAR. Now you can get in there pretty quickly. Because it is 25%, it does allow the advanced cleanup to recommend the contractor. So we've had over 300 sites do advanced cleanup since 2014. And if you're looking at the cleanup cost and the cost savings to the state, so this does allow them, it's regardless of score. A long time ago, some of you guys, and I want to clear up this misconception, advanced cleanup was originally for sites not in funding range. That is not the case anymore. Advanced cleanup does not have a score limit, so you can have a site scored 75 and do advanced cleanup on it. So there is no score limit to that. So advanced cleanup redevelopment, and this ties really closely into what James was saying about if you're redeveloping a property. There's $5 million a year in that's earmarked out of the advanced cleanup money, and we move forward quickly with that. There is no cost share or cost savings. So if you want to apply for advanced cleanup redevelopment, and I have a slide that kind of goes through this again, so we'll talk about it a little bit, but this is a great option. I think it's the limit for $1 million a year for the project. It might actually be for the owner, $1 million a year, but we move very quickly on those, and there is no application period. So you don't have to wait. You send that application in any time during the year when your client's going to be redeveloping their properties. So talking a little bit about the differences here. Individual sites, a bundle is 5 or more. ACR is, like I said, there is no cost savings. You do still have to do the LCAR with ACR, and you have to have a redevelopment plan approved. We do the bundles in ACR or performance-based cleanup. And like I said, it does have limits as to how much you can do on a project, as do the bundles and the individual sites for regular. Thank you very much. And I think we're open now for questions for any of our presentations. And these are my contact information, and again, it's available on the website under the PRP contacts link.
Hi, I'm Howard Lloyd representing GDP. I had 2 PALM questions. My first question is there any guidance or restrictions on selecting the data, for groundwater baseline?
Groundwater baseline? So I don't know if there's specific petroleum guidance. There is not guidance for, generally you look at where your contamination is. You're talking about like pre-injection?
Yeah, in other words, you could do 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and it becomes a statistical average that you have to establish. So is there like a minimum of 2 years or 3 years or?
I don't believe that there is a minimum requirement.
Okay, so then you can select any, okay, great. That was one question. Second question is, for full quarterly monitoring for closure, can you use is it acceptable to use 2 consecutive semi-annuals followed by 2 consecutive quarterly?
So I'm going to throw that site specific out again. Really, it kind of depends on the extent of groundwater monitoring that you've conducted. If you have substantial groundwater monitoring over a long period of time, and it's clear that you have, I guess, a data set that would support the 2 quarterly groundwater after the semi-annual, then yes, I would think that that would be acceptable.
Good, so it is flexible. Thank you.
Yes.
Hear me all right? There it goes. Okay. I'm Steve Hilfiker on behalf of the Florida Groundwater Association Board of Directors and Environmental Committee. We want to thank you, James, Natasha, Leah, the entire PRP for your advancements in natural attenuation monitoring conversion toward remediation. We think that that's going to take a lot of sites that have been just floundering in NAM for many, many, many years and convert them into closures. And I think that will be a great advancement for the program. So we appreciate and applaud your efforts that you've done on that over the last several years. We also are grateful for your openness to performance-based contracting and for the opportunities to look at all methods of closure strategies to help advance the program. We appreciate your work and recognition of those efforts. We're grateful for the appropriations that are there, the budget this year, and we look forward to assisting, with continued communications with these types of ideas in the future as an association for the Florida Groundwater Association. But thank you so much. We appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Can you comment on any additional COCs that are not traditional, been looked at in the petroleum program that have been suggested that apparently we're going to be needing to add to our COC list to your chief closure, like trimethyl naphthalene, isopropyl benzene, et cetera?
Yeah, those are petroleum products, so if they are detected, and I think I did share the guidance a couple of times, that guidance has been around since Tom Conradi. If they are detected on a site, we will be cleaning them up.
Yes, Jesse Brown with WSP. Quick question on an emergency response where initial spill and you sample for groundwater and you've got all the soil, but the only thing you have an exceedance of cumene above the 0.8 but well below the 700 health-based. Can you health-base that, or are you going to have to?
So if you look at the statute for
Yep.
petroleum, if it's state funded, it's going to let it.
No, this is just an emergency response initially.
Yeah, so if it's non-program,
Yep.
There is a carve-out for the organoleptic closure levels in the statute.
So I guess would I have to, if that's the only, I put a well in right next to where the spill was, I've got a cumene exceedance just above the GCTL, but well below the health, and I've got all my soil. Can I go closure on that, or do I have to assign or go out and do full assessment of that one groundwater?
I believe the owner has to agree to that, and you
he does.
you list in the closure that
Right.
it's out there, but it's below health-based levels.
You'd still have to meet the organoleptic exemption criteria.
Right. No. Right.
Right.
No,
Right.
but I guess I was just trying to get I think I can close it, but I don't know if it's gray area where I have to go put more wells in and show, even though it's just an initial spill.
Right. Yes. So you would still need to meet the Chapter 62, 780, 680 RMO1 criteria for organoleptic exemptions. So just having one well that's not delineated would not meet the criteria for RMO1.
So you wouldn't need to clean up in 30 days. I think that's what you're asking.
Right.
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 Okay.
So I understand that the default exposure unit for residential properties is a quarter acre. You did mention that there's the option to establish like alternate exposure units. Do you have guidance for that?
No.
For the size and, you know, the number of samples, if you have to do like the UCL 95, I know 10 is required for.
So it's very site specific for alternative exposure units. An example would be, you know, if you're going to close under RMO2 and you're going to do a deed restriction to restrict it to industrial commercial, you could propose an exposure unit of 0.5 acres instead of a quarter acre. And you just need to make sure that your receptors are going to be equally and randomly exposed over that exposure unit. So if you proposed a 5-acre exposure unit for industrial commercial, it's unlikely that a receptor would be exposed over that 5-acre exposure unit. It's too large. But maybe 5 acres would be more appropriate for recreational. So it's very site specific. But that's how you would. That's what you would do, is you would propose the exposure unit based on your receptors and your data set.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Brian Moore, GHD. James was making comment about a buffer under a groundwater use restriction around the plume. You could just comment on if there's a specific distance or how you go about determining what that buffer is. Thank you.
So that's best professional judgment. Depending on the stability of your groundwater plume, your groundwater flow direction. We do not have a specific default buffer. It's not pre-designed.
Hey, great presentations and updates. Especially appreciate Leah coming out to the remediation conference. I'm Joe Applegate with Geosyntec. 2 questions, one for James. I think he stated we need just 2 quarters of clean after an ISR, but later under the closure request, he said we needed 4 quarters. Just a little bit, I think we just need 2 if it's an ISR versus.
James, are you on?
So we may have lost James. I think there is a difference in ISR and regular monitoring before you can do closure, but we will get back to you on that.
I believe it's 2.
I believe it's 2 as well.
I think so too.
But I will definitely have James reach out to you.
Great. Leah, on the RMO 2 and 3, I just wanted to kind of clarify. So for AGCTLs or alternate soil cleanup target levels, you stated that I believe we don't need to do a DRC.
Okay, so you do need to do a DRC if the alternative target level is based on your site. So in the example of limiting it to industrial commercial, that's site specific. But if you have something like ammonia is a good example. When Chapter 62777 FAC was published, there was a missing component or they added a component to the ammonia calculation, which resulted in a specific CTL for groundwater. However, since then, the toxicity values have been updated, and now we have alternative cleanup target levels for ammonia that are based on the pH and the temperature. So you could propose that as an ACTL and close under that without having to do a DRC. It would still get listed in the ICR because it's an alternative cleanup target level outside of 777. But there have been several chemicals that since 2005 have had updated intrinsic toxicity values that no matter what site you're in, what conditions are present, who your receptors are, it's still protective of human health and the environment. And the DVSP website, we do have a list of chemicals that have been proposed as alternative target levels that University of Florida has evaluated and we've approved based on intrinsic non-site specific exposure factors.
So for like a risk assessment, if you calculate alternate cleanup target levels, you have to do a DRC?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. Kind of a similar question for background. So you're working on the arsenic site and you do a background study and come up with 5 versus 2.1. Does that require a DRC? I know it still goes
No.
on the registry.
No, it doesn't.
The background doesn't, right?
No. If the background is approved, then that would not require a DRC.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hello. This is a question about the free quotes for reimbursable type items. We're running into situations where we'll get 3 quotes and then something gets delayed with the project, 3 more quotes, 3 more, like having to keep refresh those. For example, piping, there's some piping suppliers that they'll only go out like 2 days. But do you have any recommendations for trying to make that more efficient? Because we're getting now to where the vendors who aren't winning and still having to submit it 2 or 3 or 4 times, they're now not returning calls.
So we're running into that as well, where quotes are expiring. Most people aren't given long-term quotes due to fluctuation with inflation and costs. So we're getting very short-term quotes. We can issue a purchase order where the quote expires before the end of the period of service for that work, as long as the work is the purchase order is issued before the quote expires, and then we ask the contractor to verify the quote with the winning bid prior to proceeding. That being said, you know, if we're not hearing back from them, quotes is a big problem from everyone, but I do see a lot of change orders for rebidding, and I know that is a problem. The only solution I would have for that would be performance-based cleanup, where you're not required to do quotes.
I had a question that James Treadwell brought up. I'm Donna Klein, I'm with Terracon. He mentioned if the lab can't meet the PQL, and he gave an example for benzene, that you have to reference the approved PQL. So are you referring to the PQL guidance?
I think what he's saying is that we do expect them to meet the PQL unless they dilute it. So you do want a lab that can normally meet actually our CTLs, but there are those 4 small benzenes that the PQL is the alternative, what they can meet for their best. We ran into an issue with a lab that was not meeting those. They weren't. It was harder for them to get down to the lowest PQLs they could, and I think that's why he talked about that, is make sure your labs are running it and using the best PQL they are, and then just make a note on there that you're using the PQL for those.
Yeah. But are you referencing your guidance document?
For the PQL?
Yeah.
I think it's the lab's
I keep
PQL.
saying yes.
It's those 4. Yeah, he is talking about the guidance with the 4 small PAHs that you can use the PQLs on, not the other contaminants.
Unless the lab's PQL is lower than that guidance document.
Right.
You have to follow the PQL that the lab actually.
Right.
So if the lab says it's lower than that guidance document, you can't use that guidance document. Use the PQL that's been updated to be lower.
Right. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, morning. Sorry. Morning. I know this question gets asked a lot, but has anything ever or being pushed forward on the $325,000 cap?
So if you look at the statute, there are purchasing categories in the statutes. 325 is the highest one.
Yeah, and then, but I mean, you know how long that number has been around for? I don't know, more than 10 years, and since then we've had so much inflation and everything else. So it seems like that should be something that, should be, kind of pushed forward, I think.
So currently, the rule and the statute, we have to follow both of those. And the rule says we have to pick a funding category from the statute, and we picked the highest one in the statute. So we cannot change that unless there's a change there.
I just want to clarify the post-active remediation monitoring question. It is professional judgment, but I do want to clarify that if you do use semi-annual and quarterly sampling events, you have to demonstrate that equilibrium conditions throughout the fluctuations of the groundwater was demonstrated. The purpose and the intention of the 4 quarters of PARM are so that you can demonstrate all groundwater fluctuations throughout the year so that you know that you've been able to see every opportunity of that contamination to be demonstrated in your monitoring wells. So you can't always just take, okay, it's 6 months, it's 3 months, it's whatever. You have to truly demonstrate that you have met all those conditions.
I think we're good. Thank you all for joining us today.
Want to let everybody, oh, there we are. Just want to let everybody know, don't forget, we do have a reception break next.